For Bournemouth West, Conor Burns, who knew Mrs Thatcher well. Conor Burns, welcome to you. What do you make of the reaction now as the dust begins to settle? It's the day after the news. What's your sense of how people are receiving the news?
I think some of us are struggling to join two things together. I'm watching the coverage of this iconic global political figure who transformed the landscape of British politics, arguably only one of the two peacetime prime ministers of the 20th century, her and Clement Attlee, who determined to use office to fundamentally change the country they were governing. But on the other side, I'm actually starting to realise that I'm never going to see someone who was a very dear friend again, and putting those two together is an interesting dilemma.
How often did you see her, and how would you characterise those twilight years, which were, for the most part, spent in private?
I used to see her pretty much weekly. I had some very special times with her. I used to get into a routine of going to see her most Sunday evenings, and her weekends would be very quiet. Often I was the only visitor who would come in over the course of that weekend, other than one of her two faithful carers who was on duty then. And we would have wonderful chats. Her memory wasn't great at all, but her instincts were in full working order, and she was always, funnily, much more interested in the future than the past. I remember once saying to her, you know, you must, when you look around the room here and see the silver bowl that the 1922 committee gave you on the 10th anniversary of becoming Prime Minister, and the pictures of Chequers and Number 10, I said, you must sit here and think, not bad at all. And she straight away said, as my father used to say, it's not what you've done that counts, it's what you're going to do next. So she was intensely interested in what was going on in politics, what was going on in the world. And she retained that interest right to the end.
Yeah, there are strategies you can use, aren't there? When somebody has a failing memory, there are things you can do to try and jog it along a little bit and make them feel a bit more comfortable. What did you make of the depiction of that declining health as portrayed in The Iron Lady? I mean, there were those people who enjoyed what it did. There were others who felt it was inappropriate. What was your view?
I thought it was a brilliantly acted film. I think Meryl Streep did it brilliantly. It deserved the Oscar that she got for it. The content of it was rubbish. It was actually very funny. I went to see it. I turned down all the invitations to go and see the previews of it, on the basis that journalists would ask me what I thought and they'd think it was what she thought. So I didn't see it until it came on general release. And I went actually to see it on Leicester Square on the Sunday that it opened. And I went from Leicester Square to watch The Iron Lady to Chester Square to have a gin and tonic with Lady T. And I told her, I've just been to see a film about you. And she said, what do you mean a film about me? I said, well, they've made a film about your life and your career as Prime Minister. And I said, it's an hour and a half. And straight away she said, I can't imagine anything worse. She had no interest in reading about herself. The funny thing is, when you would show her something that was in the newspaper about her, she would throw it away. She was much more interested in action than reflection.
Just staying with the film, I mean, I know when I was talking to my eldest child about this yesterday, of course, she knew very little about Baroness Thatcher beyond the fact she'd seen that film. And so many young people in particular, I suppose, draw their lessons of history from Hollywood, from films and depictions like that. She's in that strange middle ground at the moment, isn't she, between history and news? When will it become... When will we get a sense of where she can be placed within that historical narrative and continuum?
I think actually the fact that young people are so fascinated by her and continue to be so inspired by her actually tells you that to some degree that position has already settled. She is going to go down in history as one of the great historic British figures. I think she'll go down there with Elizabeth I and Winston Churchill, people who will be remembered for hundreds of years to come. She was hugely flattered by the fact that young people used to flock to her when we would go to receptions and dinners, and that her ideas and the power of her ideas and the way she implemented her philosophy. Remember, she always said that politics was philosophy in action. It was much more than focus groups and posters. It was about doing what she believed to be right. And I think those lessons will stand her in great stead as history judges her, and I think history will judge her very kindly. Funnily enough, the parties that we're seeing, the things in some of these mining communities and those young people opening the champagne in Glasgow, they're a remarkable tribute to her, you know. And I remember telling her last year...
Why did you say that?
Well, I remember telling her last year about the TUC Congress selling the Thatcher death party packs. And she said that the fact that they still felt so strongly about her more than 20 years after she left Downing Street, was a tribute to the fact that she had done something in politics rather than simply been someone in politics.
Conor Burns, appreciate your views today. Thanks very much indeed.